CAT interviews at Uber, Confluent, Indeed, and many, many more companies. I've seen it all. After countless hours on the other side of the table, I know exactly what top companies are looking for, especially in LLD. In this course, I'll share the insider blueprints, what to focus on, especially key design patterns, how much multi-threading, very important, counter question, traps, and how to tackle them confidently. This course is structured, practical, and tailored on what companies are looking for right now. Let's get you interview ready right now. Hi guys, good morning. Welcome back to a new video. Ki hal chal? I hope you guys are doing good. In this, we're going to continue ahead with our actual LLD interview problems, starting off with the easy one, which is designed tic-tac-toe. Now, I hope you guys know what tic-tac-toe is. For the folks who don't know, it's just simply a cross and a zero game in which every player will play, and we have two players primarily. One player put up a cross, another player in the next turn put up a zero, and then any player who can build up straight three symbols for them, they will. Okay, now I'll tell you a quick idea of this entire lecture, how the lecture will flow. Firstly, I will give you an idea of the actual tic-tac-toe game. Then we will go and see that in an actual interview how it should proceed ahead. Then primarily, again, this process or this flow itself is kind of which I make sure I follow. You can take help again, until unless you will actually go in an LLD interview, you will not find out that what had they been teaching will not work. So this is ultimately, after trying many things, this is the flow which end up working. And then we'll just discuss the entire stuff, flow, code, and again, ifs and buts, if and else, all that stuff we will discuss. Then later on in the ending portion, we will discuss about the extensibility part. Considering if you have time, which you will 99.9% will not have, then how and what you can go on to. Even if you don't have time, it is still good, in the ending note, in just 1 minute, tell about what all extensibility you can touch on. Now, let's start off with the actual stuff, right? Again, if you see this, yeah, it's rolling. So, firstly, what actually is a tic-tac-toe? As I mentioned, that it's a game with X's and zeros primarily. Again, we will see in future that in extensibility that it can actually be extensible for more symbols. But yeah, let's proceed with this. It's primarily a two-player game, and the grid size is also 3x3, as you can see here. The primary objective of this game is that any player who can form a horizontal, vertical, or diagonal line of their character, which is X or O, again I can say symbol as well, with X or O, that player wins the game. Now, primarily for your understanding, the rules of the game is that it is primarily a 3x3 grid, right? Player primarily uses X and O's, and then the winner is the one who can get row, column, or diagonal straight with their symbols. And again, as soon as the person will get it, the game will end immediately. There's also a condition that what if no one was able to achieve it, that's called a draw, in which that there are no more places to fill in the cell, and no player has got all as a row, column, or diagonal, and then the game ends in a tie. And obviously you will have to make sure that there are no illegal moves, as in if I have already placed a cross here, you should not place a zero here, right? You should only place a symbol that is already on the empty places and also on the correct places inside the grid, and so on and so forth. So basically giving a normal very normal alerts that a symbol on a tile already occupied by an opponent symbol, I should not place it. Even if it's occupied by myself, I should not place it. So if I have a X and then a 0, and then I should not place a X again here. I should not place a X here as well. I should only place a X on the board, and that too inside the board itself. Now, this is the idea which I wanted to give you for your understanding. Is this how you will start it? No. Let's see that in an interview how it will go about. Again, that is the difference between how you will see in other videos versus here, that I actually try to focus on the time in an interview is very less, and that we are trying to focus on that how we should approach that we can complete and give a good impression to the interviewer in time. Okay, let's see. The interview simply mentioned one thing: then design a tic-tac-toe game system, or design a tic-tac-toe game. That's it. Like, it's It's pretty, straightforward. Now, as you, the candidate, your task is to outline the flow of the game. Now, usually, I always try to do is that, again, there are two ways to approach this as well. First way is that you try to enact the game. Enact the game. What is the inaction of the game? Inaction of the game is keep on writing the points. I will bring the board. I will bring the player, opponent player. I will bring the symbols. Imagine that it's a hard board, like it's a hard board, right? And then enact the game. Then I will place the symbol. Then my opponent will place the symbol. Then I will check that which positions to place, and then I will place the symbol again. And then it will keep on going. And then at one point I will get it. Then, so you see, I'm enacting the entire process and then writing down the same thing. This is first way, which 99% time I go ahead with this. But obviously, it is a bit lengthy to write because I mentioned the entire inaction of the game you have to write, because again, this will be helpful for you to know the functionalities, to know the entities, and so on and so forth. I try to say, okay, although I have to do this, but make it a bit concise that you can write it in an interview time. Because again, I mentioned for LLD, the biggest currency is time. If you can get things done in time, you are sorted. So, okay, we will just try to make it a bit shrink. Although you try to enact the game by yourself, but still you try to put it in a small points. That okay, we will have a 3x3 kid. Who we as in two players. Two players will have, and again, why I'm saying two players, why not more? Because next in future I can ask my interviewer, do he want something else? But currently I am telling my understanding of the game, and that is very much required in every LLD interview, that you tell your assumptions, your understanding first. Okay, let's proceed forward. And then I know the game will continue. As you remember, there's a for loop here. The game will keep on continuing until one player get three of their symbols in a row. Whenever I say row, I am not meaning a row like a row and a column. No, I'm saying in a row as in like in the usual English when we say horizontal, vertical, or diagonal. It can be right diagonal or left diagonal, both of them. And then, or the game will continue until the grid is completely filled, which will result obviously in a draw. So this is my understanding of the game, which I have wrote very concisely in 3-4 lines. Although if you want that Aryan, I might miss anything, no worries. You can enact the entire game by writing it, and that also will work. Okay, now just interview might interrupt or might not. Like again, you just have to look at the interviewer. If he doesn't interrupt, okay, like you are good. Now you should make sure that clarify of for sure, like no matter what, clarify for sure. Clarification can be asked by you primarily. Again, it can be a closed ended clarification or an open ended clarification. Closed ended clarifications are much more encouraged than open ended clarification, but it's your responsibility to clarify. If you are able to clarify both open and closed, just clarify. Closed ended clarification simply mentions that focus or ask very straightforward questions, that are we actually focusing on 3x3 board, or is it a n cross m board or a n cross n board? Because in the extensibility portion you will see that we have taken n cross n board, and so on and so forth. Again, I am giving spoilers or as I'm going ahead because I don't want you to be in a perception, okay, Aryan, is this wrong or right? I will tell exactly everything, what is wrong, what is right, and what you should write. Cool. Now you want to say, Aryan, you want to teach wrong also? Yes, I will teach wrong as well. Okay, let's continue without scaring you further. Now, obviously, will this be a two-player game? Because I can have multiplayer game as well. Is it a human game? Because that's also a question. And any other core requirements? Open-ended question and closed-ended questions. Okay. Now the interviewer will tell that it's a standard 3x3 tic-tac-toe game. Okay. Now I am sorted. It's a two-player human game. Okay. Some of the core requirements which he wants me to focus on is move validation and win or draw conditions. Okay. Now, again, interviewer primarily there's a 99% chance that he will not write. He will just speak verbally. It's your responsibility to have everything intact and written down on your interview doc. So I will firstly write whatever I knew and also whatever my interviewer told. I just appended that exact same thing. Again, if he just mentions something else as well, I could mention the same thing in front of my text. But make sure everything you write it down. Now, when things are sorted, I will start getting the key components or the key entities before even proceeding forward. Now, you might say, Aryan, is it required? Yes, because obviously you have to write the code now. But now you might say, Aryan, like before I write the code, should I actually draw the diagrams and stuff? Not necessarily. See, right now I haven't started writing the actual code. I will start writing the actual code when I am good with at least a couple of things. And what are those couple of things? Those are few entities, and also again when I say few, I mean main components, key components, and also few design patterns. Now you might say, are you asking us specifically to write design patterns? Yes, I am asking you, and you will see why. So firstly, let's go on to key components. Firstly, very first thing is that it's a two-player human game having these symbols. So obviously, I will have a symbol. Again, it can be a simple enum as well. So I'll have a simple enum. Again, you can have multiple more enums in future, which you can append here itself. Next thing which you realized is a simple board. Again, it can be a game board. So I will have a board itself. Okay, I will have a board, and again, that's simply represent me a game board. Then obviously, if I go back, I will have a player. So you see that I'm grabbing all these entities from my entire enacting of the process, or I can say the conditions which I had made. So another entity was the player itself. Again, forget about all these conditions, we'll come on to later on. I'm just writing on the main entities. Now, imagining main entities are done, then you will come on to actual design challenge, which means that you will specifically write down that what design challenges you could encounter. Now you might say, Aryan, without even writing the code, how I can incorporate or how I can think of design challenges? It is true. But it is an interview. You have to tell. And it is good that you portray things from start, that how you're going to go about in future. So in the very beginning itself, you should incorporate couple of design patterns and their use case, how they can be integrated in your current code. Now, it might sound like, Aryan, you are asking us to, no matter what, give a design pattern. Yes, kind of, I'm asking you to, no matter what, give a design pattern to the interviewer, because it will help to tell the interviewer at least the person knows about the design pattern. You may or may not, again, you may or may not implement that design pattern, but still tell that thing to the interviewer, because right now in the current state of market, DSA plus LLD is being mixed. Now, the essence is it could be a DSA question rather than a LLD question. And the essence is it could be LLD question rather than a DSA question. Now, based on how much weightage of individual component is, you should make sure that you might not have time to implement all design patterns, or maybe even a single design pattern. You might end up spending most time in DSA. That is the reason it is important to at least portray that you know about LLD and you could have used this design pattern. Now, coming on backwards, again, all these things no one will tell because people will try to focus on what you should do. But as I mentioned, LLD is something which is very big, and you have to figure out what exactly to tell the interviewer and what exactly to write, because it's not feasible to do everything in a 45 minutes or even 1 hour interview. Now, proceeding ahead, I will try to make sure that, okay, I will tell a couple of design pattern. I will say that I have multiple players, and again, multiple as in two players who are playing turns. So I can have a game state, and that state could keep on changing. Now I will have move validations, which primarily my interviewer asked me to do. I will track my player's turn, because obviously each player will be validating their move, right? And I have to make sure that, okay, whenever the game ends, I should say, okay, if it's a win or draw condition. Now, as I mentioned above, that's a very vague statement. I never focus on any design pattern per se. Now I will say, okay, I will use strategy design pattern for the player interaction. Again, I can use. I'm not saying specifically I should use or should not. I can use. Now, all these stuff, if you don't know, have already been discussed. In behavioral, you can see strategies already been discussed. All these have already been discussed. Video is here. The corresponding notes, if you want, are also here. So everything is already there for all design patterns. So yeah, let's proceed forward. So what we are saying that okay, we can have a strategy and pattern. Now you might ask, Aaron, how would I know that what all design patterns could be used? So there's kind of a brahmastra as in universal kind of stuff. In most of the problems, you can incorporate strategy and factory no matter what. Again, in most of the problems, in more problems, again, I'm not saying most, but in more problems, you always want to show the thing to the people. So observer can also be incorporated in most of them. So obviously, if you are doing some operation, you want to show it to someone. Obviously, you can incorporate observer. Again, I'm not saying that okay for tic-tac-toe these are very important. No, I'm saying these can be fitted in this problem. And obviously, as we are moving from let's say a specific in progress state to a X state to a zero state to a like to a complete state, so I can maybe incorporate state design pattern as well. Now, is this a good problem to discuss state design pattern? No. Is it a good problem to discuss observer? No. Is it a good problem to discuss factory? Yes. Is it a good problem to discuss strategy? Yes. But still, I will tell everything to the interviewer. At least he knows that I'm aware of it. Okay, let's proceed ahead. And that's the reason. Like, this is the thing. This thing, important to tell. This thing, not necessary, but good to just give an impression. Okay, let's proceed ahead. We have strategy pattern. Now, strategy pattern, for the player interactions. Now, when I say strategy, it literally mean the player strategy, moving strategy. Obviously, in a game, you have two human players. Now, you might ask, are human players will make move themselves? Then why do you need a strategy for it? So, in future, I can incorporate because again, it's your duty that you can think of future and think of okay, if you have human, you can have AI as well. So, AI will be another player having its own strategy to make move. So, I can implement that. So I will say, okay, I will have AI players in future and they will have their own make move and thus I can fit that as a strategy, player strategy. Now, as I mentioned, state pattern could also be there. Again, as I mentioned, this problem is not a good problem to discuss the state design pattern. Why? Because this doesn't necessarily have that state, which we usually have. For example, an ATM machine, they have their fixed state. Okay, from here that you go to, opening state and then pin, like enter pin state, then, cash entering state, check balance state, then cash without state. So there are many states. Here, it's very vague. It's kind of okay, X move state, and then O move state, back to X move state, then back to O move state, and then from X I can go to X winning state, or from O I can go to X O winning state. So this doesn't necessarily seem that much helpful for state pattern, but okay, kind of okay, it's good. So that is something which we have. Another is observer, as I mentioned, not necessarily required, but for anything I can technically put up or fit in observer. Because obviously, if I'm playing a game, so I would need to notify some players. Okay, you have your turn, now it's your turn, and so on and so forth. So I can easily fit in, observers. And any which ways, I can have logging, notification, UI bits, and so on and so forth, observers itself. Next, as I mentioned, factory. Okay, it's technically this also can be fitted anywhere whatsoever because obviously you will initialize some object, you will create some object, and creation design pattern. It's one of the most important one. As you can see, if I come off the creation, it's kind of the most important one. So obviously, I can create players. I can even create symbols. I can create many things. But yeah, I can let's say go ahead with creating player itself. So what I did in the very beginning itself, I just told the interviewer I can use strategy for AI and human. I can use state design pattern. Again, I'll highly recommend if you don't have time and if you are not confident, then maybe you can skip state and observer. If you have confidence, then you can just keep up strategy first, second factory, third observer, and fourth state. This is how you should go about it. Okay, let's proceed forward. Now let's come on to the actual implementation. Now, people are obviously always confused that Arun, it's such a big code in LLD. How will I actually organize my flow and remember what exactly I have to do? Okay, no worries. For that, simply break it down. Always try to break it down to different components. Why I am saying this is because mostly companies don't want you to write a full-fledged LLD code that should run. Again, there's a caveat here. If it's a specific DSA, code, or if it's a very small expectation of them, they might expect. But unless they're asking a very full-fledged LLD code, then they are not expecting you to write everything down. They're expecting a few functions or a few specific steps, or maybe a few design patterns based on what are their needs. What I mean by that is a few companies could focus, let's say they can focus on booking movie booking only, and that to concurrent booking. One company can focus on that I want the entire code, working code, and run the output as well. One company can focus on I want the design patterns and how you use the design patterns. You see that everyone have their own expectations, and that is determined in the very beginning while you are having conversation with the interviewer. Coming ahead, how to write or how to make the corresponding class diagrams. As I mentioned in the very beginning of this thing, introduction, it is not feasible to make the entire class diagram. Then I didn't what? Should I make it? Why you have made them? I have made it to explain you guys that how you can approach it. So I knew that in my code I will use strategy. Let's say I'll use state, observer, and let's say factory, and so on and so forth. So I knew that I will use a strategy. So I will have a player strategy. So you see, firstly, again, even if you want to make the corresponding diagram, you can make it stepwise, kind of going bottom up. That I made my strategy, player strategy, and then let's say the human player strategy. In future, I can incorporate my AI player strategy as well. Okay. Next component I made my game state. I will simply say that I will have a corresponding in progress state, x one state, o one state, draw state, x x progress state, and so on and so forth. Then I saw, okay, maybe I can make, I could have made a factory as well here, but okay, let's ignore that. We can maybe take in the extensibility portion, or I could have had an observer here as well, but okay, ignore that. Maybe we can take it in the extensibility portion. Focus on the things which you can implement right now at the moment, or maybe ask the interviewer that what exactly he wants you to implement. Then I realized I made the core entities. I made board. Obviously, board will be required. Obviously, a player will be required. Obviously, the actual tic-tac-toe game will be required. TikTok game. Obviously, the actual tic-tac-toe game will be required. So these are the very main entities, right? Which we also saw in the very beginning. So with that in mind, you see that I have already drawn this, I have drawn this, I have drawn this. Forget about how they are linked with each other. Forget about that, right? For now, forget about it. But at least that you will have, and again, whenever we have the game state, it will have a context as well, which we already saw in the state design pattern when we discussed about the state design pattern itself. That it has its own context. Now, you have already drawn individual components. So this you have drawn, this you have drawn. Like when I say drawn, you have written down. Or maybe thought of. Now let's start implementing individual of them. So I will implement strategy. Okay, I'll simply say that I will have a player strategy and they will have to make move. Then I will say, because I can have human or AI, so because the interview only wants for human, but I want to show him that, okay, I'm good or master at LLD, I'll make an interface saying it's a player strategy, which I can inject anywhere in the future, and they will have to make move. I will give a board and they will return me a position, which is the corresponding move which I can make. Now I have just given a human player strategy and say that, okay, bro, please make a move. It's a human player. So technically, I will actually ask for the player a move. Then I will check if it's a valid move. And if yes, I will just return that move. If not, then I will ask him, okay, bro, it's an invalid move. And I will ask him, bro, keep on retrying. So this is how I simply implemented strategy design pattern right now with this simple short code. You might say, Aaron, you haven't implemented board, you haven't implemented, all that classes and stuff, because you might ask, Aaron, what about board? What about different other classes which you had or which you need? You remember that in the very beginning we made a couple of entities, but you might ask, Aaron, those entities did not have anything. Like we remember we made player, we made yeah, we made board, we made player, we made symbol, but they don't have anything as such implemented here. Yes, true. But again, I don't need it right now because it's good that I go on back if I need something. Let's say if I'm seeing, okay, is valid move. Yeah, I will implement it when I will need it. Now, coming on back, let's say I implemented my state pattern. So state pattern will say, okay, I will have a corresponding game state and I will have different states. I primarily have to go to the next state. Next state will say that give me a context. Again, if you don't understand any of these things, no worries. Simply go and make sure that you are studying state design pattern. I will not explain individual design patterns in this video. Okay, so I will have a game state and then it will simply say next state. Now you might say, Aaron, is this required? Technically, I will say no. It's totally up to you. If you want to incorporate and say the final state itself, you can have a game over or is over state as well. If you don't want, you can have it here as well. There is no very hard and fast rule. Although the code, whatever you write, whatever I write here as well, or whatever I write after spending 3 hours as well, can have many issues in terms of extensibility. But the fact is that in an hour, how we can write a good code, or what all things at least we can communicate. At least if I write it here, I will just tell the interviewer that I can have a is over state as well. Communication is important. At least the person knows that you are thinking and you know what could be good or bad. Now, as I mentioned, that I can have a x turn state, I can have a o turn state, I can have a x1 state, I can have a o1 state. As I mentioned, I can have, let's say, x turn state. From x turn, next could be a o turn state. From o, next can be x turn state back. And from x turn state, as x has moved, I could reach the x1 state, or from o, I can reach the o1 state. So this is how I can go about it. Now again, it has to implement that next method. In that, I will simply say context and will simply set the next state as o turn state. The only catch here is that for context, I will have to also go and check. From context, I'll go and check if the current person has won. So make sure that you put the next state, or you set the state as the x1 state. So you have to incorporate that line here as well, right? Again, the easier version of not using an actual state design pattern, because again, as I mentioned, a state design pattern will say, okay, I have a specific states and a context will actually handle those states. Now you will see in the extensibility portion, I will show you a piece of bit in which we are technically not using context, and we are kind of going from one state to another from each individual states. This is the easier version just to understand, but technically, as I mentioned, that this problem of tic-tac-toe doesn't necessarily revolve around state design pattern. It's the reason it is flexible enough. Okay, as I mentioned, it's not a game over state because x still has this term, so it's the game over is false. Same thing for o turn state. As I mentioned, that I can set the state as x turn, and also there should be condition that just go to context and check about the state itself, and if you have the o has won, then make sure that you put the next state as o1 state. And same way, I have the x1 state, there's no next state here, and o1 state, there's no next state here. Now this is simply a simple implementation of state design pattern. Again, you can skip that entirely as well, it's completely fine. Now comes the main part. Okay, not the main part, but a part of context, because game context comes in parallel or in consideration with the state pattern itself. So game context is the actual person which will handle the routing of next. So next, whenever is called, so context of next is called, whenever it is called, you just technically go and call the current states next, pass in the current context. Everything, this entire thing is explained in the state design pattern video. Now Coming on to the main portions, because obviously you realized when you were writing the strategy design pattern code, you realized that board is one of the main entities. Okay, let's write the board. So I will have a board. Although the interview specifically mentioned it's a 3x3, but I will say that okay, I can pass from my main function about row and columns, and it can be a n cross m board or a row cross column board. Now in the extensibility portion, you will see I have put up a r cross r board as well. It's fine. It's fine however you want to go about it. You want to hard code, you can hard code. You want to put up row column, you can put up row columns. It's totally about how you communicate that I will simply have it extensible, that this can be changed, or this is I'm right now even changing it. Now, I'll simply initialize with the empty symbol in the very beginning. Then I will have some of the main functions for the board. If you remember, whenever we were writing the strategy pattern, so if I go up and here we were having, is valid move and so on and so forth. So whatever functions you feel like, okay, a board should check that, okay, the move is valid or not, and just making a move and so on and so forth, you can just incorporate that. Another big doubt which people end up having is, Aryan, I have a function name. I'm not sure in which class should I write. I should write it in board, or is it a player, or is it a game context, or is it a game manager, as in a tic-tac-toe game, and so on and so forth. So like people have a very evident doubt that in which class should I write my function. So this make move player should ideally make a move, right? So ideally I should put this make move function inside my player class. Why I have put up in the board class? Now this thing will come up a lot, and I'll highly recommend that figure out this thing very fast. That write function anywhere and then go ahead. If you will keep on thinking that okay, I have this function in this class I should write, or in other class and so on and so forth, you will end up confusing and you will waste a lot of your time. So simple. You are making a move saying that for this position, this is the symbol which I need to keep. So position, basically a board will have a position, and on that I'm placing a symbol. Isn't it a property that a board will have, a board will have a grid will have a position will have a symbol, I should place it. So in the board I can update it. Now you can call this thing from a player or from the tic-tac-toe game as well, which means from the actual tic-tac-toe game I can go and ask the player for a move. Player will give me a move which is a position and a symbol, and that placing of that I can keep it in the board. So you see that technically I ended up touching all of them. It's just that figure out that what piece of touching, or what piece of logic should I keep it here. Now this video is can be a bit long because I want to focus primarily on all the concepts. I tried to keep all the individual patterns a bit low, a bit short, but again my entire task is for you to focus on the very normal generic issues which everyone faces, which I also faced in my time. Now, so I'll just check if it's a valid move, and how to check. Okay, if it's a valid row, and if it's a valid column, valid column, and if it's already empty, then it's a valid move to place that specific whatever I'm placing. And again, making a move, just giving this position and giving this symbol and just placing it. Now, check the game state. Now, in that game state, checking the corresponding game state, you will simply see, okay, if it's a row win, if it's a column win, if it's a diagonal win, then okay, I just actually won. So in the extensibility portion, you will see, as I mentioned above as well, I have used a different variation of state. Right now I'm asking context for the next state, and context will simply say that bro, I am the game context. You will call the next for me. So technically I will set the state to the X state. If I'm at the O state, I will set the state to the X state. And also I've mentioned that here also I can put the logic of that if the person has won, then put the state as O won state. So I'll put the state as O won state. So with that, the next state would be set. With that, the next state would be set. Now, I will show you an easier version also of it in the extensibility portion. So hold on if you maybe have this issue, because people usually end up having issues in state pattern a lot, especially when it is for the easier problems like not ATM machine and so on and so forth. Now, again, as I mentioned, there could be additional logic also for draw and moving on and so on and so forth. You can just implement that by yourself if you want. Now, again, this is winning line, which I have been using as a function. So modularity is very important. So make sure that you don't repeat the logic again and again, and you kind of reuse the logic. Although here in this case as well, we might have reused the logic and put up in a different function, but okay, it's still already we have passed a lot of time. We might not have that much time in future, so we just check the diagonal condition, row condition, and a column condition. Now, as we mentioned that we have done with the board, but is board done? Like board is done. Our game strategy is done. Our state of game states are done. The actual game, the actual tic-tac-toe game, that is remaining. Okay, let's go on to tic-tac-toe game. Now, just to showcase that I'm thinking of in the industry logic, or basically just to showcase that I'm thinking of in terms of I'm a very high level individual contributor, I might say, okay, if my company is making a tic-tac-toe game, obviously I am specializing in the board games. So I will make a board game interface so that in future my company can also make a snake game, can also make a Connect 4 game, because all these are board games. So for every board game, they will have one common function called as play, because obviously you will play a game. It's a game. No matter if it's a game or a board game, you will play a game. So I just kept one function. If you're confused on what function to write, just write any simple function and go ahead. Again, as I mentioned, there's not much time to think, just to anticipate, okay, what should I do, what should I not? Just write, just speak some explanation for it and move ahead. You might say it's very rubbish advice. Just follow this once. You will get to know if it's rubbish or not. Cool. Proceed forward. Now, in my tic-tac-toe game, obviously, I will keep all the entities which I wanted. For a game, I would need a board. Primarily, I will keep it. I will need a player. In that, I have hard-coded 2 players. Now you might say, Aryan, but you were referring about, AI player. Yeah, that player, player strategy was that for a player X or a player O, right now, even if both are human or AI, it doesn't matter, because I will put up their strategy as AI strategy or human strategy, however I want. Right now, I have only 2 players. It can be human or AI. And this is the current player which is being tracked. And game context, it is for the state. State is in pattern, which I have taken. So I will take X strategy and O strategy. Both of them right now, imagining I will pass as human player strategy. So I will just put up both of the players I initialize by saying they both are, with the corresponding symbol and with the corresponding strategy. Board I initialized, which I just made above, and also current player is the first player who will start the game. Now comes the fun part, play function. This play will actually end up going endlessly until the game becomes over. How to know the game is over? I can refer my game context. If you remember, in the game context, we had that is over function, right? Although you can also, as I mentioned, you can also have a is over state as well. But if you remember, I have a is over function in every state. As I mentioned, you can have a is over function, is over state as well. So you can have a quick check if the game context, current state, if it's a is over state, is an instance of is over state, that also you can do. But again, totally up to you, however you want to go about it. Both are completely fine, because it's not that of a big deal. Now, I'll simply check here. Now, if someone in the comment section might argue, no, Aryan, it's a very big deal. Okay, good for you, and try to make all these big deals in an interview, and you will end up seeing, okay, what will happen. Because again, as I mentioned, like time is very important. Cool. Coming on forward, I'll keep on going until my game becomes over, which means I will firstly print the board on the console. Then I will ask the player, the current player, to make a move. Whenever the current player makes a move, he will give me a position that, okay, bro, I wanted this place to move on. Then I'll ask my board to say, bro, put up for this player on this specific position just put up the symbol. Then when he puts up, I will check the current state. This will tell me the current state, whatever the current game state is, and I will then switch a player. If the current state has gone to the winning state, so its corresponding win or game over will be true, and obviously with that I can simply have a check. Now, some other methods which can be there in my tic-tac-toe game, because obviously tic-tac-toe game will obviously have a play, will obviously have a constructor as well. What other thing can be just helper methods? For example, switch player. Just doing a player switch, a simple switch if else condition, and also announcing the result. Or again, just these display methods, these display methods also could be in your actual tic-tac-toe class as well. But again, you want to display the board, so it's good to keep in board itself. But announcing the players or announcing the result is kind of the instance of this tic-tac-toe. So tic-tac, it's good to announce the result in the tic-tac-toe class as well, class only. So I simply say that in my tic-tac-toe, I'll announce the result, and I will say that if X has won, okay, my X wins. If O has won, then O wins. If no one, then it's a draw. Now, what we did, we simply solved it. Now, the person can ask, can you put up a main method? Which means, okay, just call these things. So I'll put up a player strategy, both are human right now, and then I'll call my tic-tac-toe game by passing both these strategies here, and then just call the play. And with that, we are done. That's what we did. So firstly, we just followed very simplicity, clarity, efficiency, and separation of concerns. It is good. Now, as I mentioned, there can be different extensibilities based on how you implement it above. Although in the above code, we already followed different board sizes because we followed n cross m, right? N cross m board size. But even if you want, you can actually say that, bro, I will just follow n cross n board size, and maybe in the above portion you might hardcode things. Here you will just simply follow the corresponding size of n cross n. Next extensibility can be, okay, what I have multiple players, no worries. I can incorporate the list of players, right? Now you might say, Aryan, this is technically not extensible in terms of it is changing the existing class. See, these are just the points which you can tell the interviewer that, okay, these can be the options, these can be the things, and I can do changes like here and here and here, and it should sort the answer, as in, like, sort your all the queries. So if you have multiple players, just get the multiple players sorted and you should be good. So I had these two players earlier. Now I will have a list of players. That's it. And I can have their own strategies and so on and so forth. Now one list of strategies can come up. Now, as I mentioned, observer design pattern could be also used. How to go about this? Simply make its own block. Obviously, for any observer, I will have a listener and then the actual observer, which is the console game event listener. It is the actual observer which will just just tell to the console that, okay, this and this is happening. So what I will do, I will just make a game event listener. He will say that on move made or on game state changed. So as soon as a move is made or as soon as any state is changed, just simply notify. Again, these can be configured. What I mean by that is that right now you will say, Aryan, game state change, technically my state is changing at every step, so on every move technically my state is changing. Yes, you can say that. So you might configure this like, okay, on game state change I can just keep the simple state as in progress, let's say in progress, sorry, let's say I can say hasn't started, or let's say start, in progress, and won. I can, let's say, keep these three states and can move from these three only. So in that I can use state, and maybe on move is kind of on every move you just kind of keep on telling the observers what's happening on the game. So a simple portion in which on move or on game state change just print something out. Now, as I mentioned, if you remembered, we can have this listener, which is my console event listener, and this can perform the actual task. That firstly, you might add these listeners, and then whenever you want to notify, you will notify all the listeners whomever you have. Right now, as you saw that I will have a console game listener, console game event listener only. But yeah, you can have multiple other listeners. You want to put it in console. You have some other remote people listening to it, or just want the notification for them to be sent. That can be catered here. And same way, as soon as I make a move, I can call this notify. As soon as I am kind of checking the game state, I can call the notify game state change, and so on and so forth. Now, if you remember in the extensibility portion, I would tell you something. I was mentioning this statement earlier while I was explaining you the state design pattern. In that, I mentioned that earlier we were handling things by context, which is actually good. And this is how you should go about it. But considering in this example of tic-tac-toe, primarily you don't need to involve state design pattern, right? So if you want to move states in general, you can simply say the new state by checking the current state and so on and so forth. Because I know it's a row winning state. So I know that this is the new state which can be there. Simply put up the new state. So in my context, I'm directly setting up. I'm not calling the next. I'm setting up manually the new state by figuring out myself. Ideally, this is not a correct implementation of state design pattern, but we don't need that as well. So this is also how you can go about implementing your state changes. Now again, here itself I have mentioned about the different state changes for different possible operations which could go. Now, as we mentioned, there could also be factory pattern, which I can use literally anywhere just to add new player types and integrating, human or AI players. I can simply have another box by saying, bro, just make a simple player factory. Now, again, interface is technically not required here, but okay, who cares? Just you can put up here itself. But this is important. Make a simple player factory, and with that, I will be able to initialize a player. So I'll simply say that just call a create player. It can have many switch case conditions as well, just to create a player. But right now I've put a very straightforward one, that create a new player with the factory, and that can be used for us to create any new player for us in the game. Again, it's very hard to cover all of these in an interview. It's just that if you just showcase, okay, how exactly it can be done with a very simple, sweet example, it's more than enough. Considering if the person is not expecting you to write a very full-fledged code, which I guess he might not expect. Now, lastly, as we literally saw a lot of things here, we were able to achieve modular, scalable code. We integrated design patterns. Although we might have done it as a push, which means okay, unnecessarily we might have incorporated some design patterns, but okay, it's good to have more than less, right? And as I mentioned, if you had chance, make sure that you firstly tell about strategy, then factory, then observer, and then state. This is how you should tell. And again, I just tried to discuss strategy and state and observer and factory and extensibility. But again, these are very much straightforward, which can be literally used anywhere in any problem. Like that is how beautiful they are. Cool. So yeah, we have custom mode sizes, we have multiple players, and we have a lot of stuff. It's much more robust and adaptable to any changes in future. Obviously, this is not the perfect one because it's impossible to design a perfect one in 45 hours, for 45 minutes. But still, it is good for your 1 hour to even 1 hour 50 minutes interview, because right now I just simply drawn and explained. You have to write that code down as well, which is the biggest challenge. Cool. Bye bye. Take care. I hope you guys liked it. Make sure that we the like target of 250 likes. See you in the next video. Then goodbye. Take care. Bye bye.